a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Unification Church. The Unification Church, also called the Unification Movement, is a worldwide new spiritual movement that was founded by and is inspired by Sun Myung Moon, a Korean spiritual leader, entrepreneur, anti-communist, and peace advocate. The name, Unification Church, is not a reference to a particular religious organization or institutional structure with centralized international control over every organization associated with it. It is a nascent, spiritually based and charismatically-led movement of legally independent organizations that range from businesses, news media, projects in education and the arts, and political and social activism. Considering that Moon repeatedly proclaimed the end of religion, and his desire to not have a church, the term unification movement is a more apt way of describing the theology, organizations, and individuals associated with him. In Moon's autobiography, he writes that UC members hung out a sign that read Holy Spirit Association for the unification of world Christianity. We chose this name to signify that we belong to no denomination, and we certainly had no plans to create a new one. Unification Church became our commonly known name later, but it was given to us by others. Currently, the Unification Church is split into several groups, all of which claim legitimacy and the spiritual authority of Moon. These groups diverge theologically and doctrinally. The most prominent groups are the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, led by Moon's widow Hak Jae-han Moon, who following Moon's death announced her distinct messianic status, and the Family Peace Association, founded by Moon's son, Hyunjin P. Moon. Due to the ongoing division, the future of the Unification Church or Unification movement and its theological and institutional legacy is in turmoil and yet to be defined. Accordingly, Unification Church beliefs and traditions are contested amongst the different schisms. In the time period from 1954 to 1994, when the Unification Church was relatively united under the flagship organization Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, the movement taught that God is the creator whose dual nature combines both masculinity and femininity and whose center is true love. In that time period, the blessing ceremony of the Unification Church, a wedding or wedding vow renewal ceremony, was a UC tradition which attracted widespread public attention as well as controversy. The UC facilitated interfaith activities with religious institutions, including mainstream Christianity and Islam. In that time period, the Unification Church was the subject of controversy over its beliefs, which differed from traditional Christian interpretations of the Bible and were called heretical and anti-Semitic by some critics. It was criticized for its involvement in politics, especially in support of the government of South Korea, for which it was investigated by a committee of the United States Congress in 1977. The UC was also accused of brainwashing its members, which led to some being subject to deprogramming. Other controversial events include Moon's 1982 conviction in the United States of filing false federal income tax returns, and criminal conspiracy in the 2001 wedding of Roman Catholic Archbishop Emmanuel Milingo to a Unification Church member in a ceremony presided over by Moon. Since its founding in 1954, the UC has expanded throughout the world, with most members living in Korea, Japan, the Philippines, and other nations in East Asia. Terminology. Moonie is a colloquial term sometimes used to refer to members of the Unification Church. This is derived from the name of the UC's founder Sun Myung Moon, and was first used in 1974 by the American media. Church members have used the word Moonie, including Moon himself, president of the Unification Theological Seminary David Kim, and Bo Hai Pak, Moon's aide, and president of Little Angels Children's Folk Ballet of Korea. In the 1980s and 1990s, the Unification Church of the United States undertook an extensive public relations campaign against the use of the word by the news media. Some journalistic authorities, including the New York Times and Reuters, now discourage its use in news reporting, although the BBC continues to. Origins in Korea. Unification Church members believe that Jesus appeared to Sun Myung Moon when he was 16 years old on Easter morning of 1935 and asked him to accomplish the work left unfinished because of his crucifixion. After a period of prayer and consideration, Moon accepted the mission, later changing his name to Sun Myung. The UC's official teachings, The Divine Principle, was first published as Wonly Wonbon in 1945. However, the earliest manuscript was lost in North Korea during the Korean War. A second, expanded version, Wonly Hesol, or Explanation of the Divine Principle, was published in 1957. Finally, its most propagated text, The Exposition of the Divine Principle, was published in 1966. Moon preached in northern Korea after the end of World War II, and in 1946 was imprisoned by the communist regime in North Korea. He was released from prison by the advance of United Nations forces during the Korean War, and moved south along with many other North Koreans. He built his first church from mud and cardboard boxes as a refugee in Busan. Moon formally founded the Unification Church in Busan on May 1, 1954, calling it the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. The UC expanded rapidly in South Korea and, by the end of 1955, had 30 centers throughout the nation. Founding of international churches. In 1958, Moon sent missionaries to Japan, and in 1959, to America. Missionary work took place in Washington, D.C., New York, and California. UC missionaries found success in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the UC expanded in Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco. By 1971, the Unification Church of the United States had about 500 members. By 1973, it had some presence in all 50 states and a few thousand members. In the 1970s, American Unification Church members were noted for their enthusiasm and dedication, which often included raising money for UC projects on so-called mobile fundraising teams. The UC also sent missionaries to Europe. The UC entered Czechoslovakia in 1968 and remained underground until the 1990s. Unification Church activity in South America began in the 1970s with missionary work. Later, the UC made large investments in civic organizations and business projects, including an international newspaper. Starting in the 1990s, the Unification Church expanded in Russia and other former communist nations. Hak Jahan, Moon's wife, made a radio broadcast to the nation from the state Kremlin Palace. As of 1994, the UC had about 5,000 members in Russia. About 500 Russian students had been sent to USA to participate in 40-day workshops. Evangelism. Moon moved to the United States in 1971, although he remained a citizen of the Republic of Korea. In the 1970s, he gave a series of public speeches in the United States, including one in Madison Square Garden in New York City in 1974, two in 1976 in Yankee Stadium in New York City, and one on the grounds of the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., where he spoke on God's Hope for America to 300,000 people. In 1975, the Unification Church held one of the largest peaceful gatherings in history, with 1.2 million people in Yeouido, South Korea. Starting in 1972, the Unification Church sponsored the International Conference on the Unity of the Sciences, a series of scientific conferences. The first conference had 20 participants, while the largest conference in Seoul in 1982 had 808 participants from over 100 countries. Participants included Nobel laureates John Eccles and Eugene Wigner. In 1975, Moon founded the Unification Theological Seminary in Barrytown, New York, partly in order to improve relations of the Unification Church with religious institutions. Professors from other denominations, including a Methodist minister, a Presbyterian, and a Roman Catholic priest, as well as a rabbi, were hired to teach Unificationist students. In the 1980s, Moon instructed UC members to take part in a program called Home Church, in which they reached out to neighbors and community members through public service. In 1982, the first large-scale blessing ceremony held outside of Korea took place in Madison Square Garden in New York City with 2,075 couples. In 1988, Moon matched 2,500 Korean members with Japanese members for a blessing ceremony held in Korea, partly in order to promote unity between the two nations. In 1991, Moon announced that UC members should return to their hometowns and undertake apostolic work there. Massimo Intravene, who studied the Unification Church and other new religious movements, said that this confirmed that full-time membership is no longer considered crucial to UC members. On May 1, 1994, Moon declared that the era of the Unification Church had ended and inaugurated a new organization, the Family Federation for World Peace, and unification would include Unification Church members and members of other religious organizations working toward common goals, especially on issues of sexual morality and reconciliation between people of different religions, nations, and races. The FUPU co-sponsored blessing ceremonies in which thousands of non-Unification Church married couples were given the marriage blessing previously given only to Unification Church members. In 1997, American civil rights activist, Baptist minister, television/radio talk show host, and political advisor Al Sharpton took part in at least 3 religious ceremonies hosted by the Unification Church, in which he and his wife, Catherine, renewed their marriage vows based on the tenets of the UC. Brainwashing controversy. In the 1970s, the Unification Church was accused of brainwashing by the newly active anti-cult movement, which included Stephen Hassan and some other former UC members. Some sociologists of religion tend to argue that these accusations were based on theories that, for the most part, have not gained acceptance among scholars. Other scholars, including some psychologists and psychiatrists, argue that brainwashing theories are widely endorsed within the academy at large. Eileen Barker, a sociologist of religion and the founder of Inform, argues that the Unification Church and other new religious movements of that time demonstrably did not have access to the irresistible or irreversible techniques they were reputedly wielding. Members of the Unification Church reported that they were forcibly deprogrammed by those who wanted to pull them out of it. In 1977, the Unification Church won a lawsuit in the United States against deprogrammers, as did some other groups about the same time. Since 1990, U.S. courts have consistently rejected testimonies about brainwashing and manipulation, stating that such theories were not part of accepted mainline science according to the Frye Standard of 1923. In 1987, scholars with American Psychological Association rejected the hypotheses of those who accused new religious movements of brainwashing and coercive persuasion, stating that those conclusions cannot be said to be scientific in any meaningful sense. Political activism. In the 1970s and 1980s, the Unification Church became noted for its political activities, especially its support for United States President Richard Nixon during the Watergate scandal, its support for anti-communism during the Cold War, and its ownership of various news media outlets through News World Communications, an international news media conglomerate which publishes the Washington Times newspaper in Washington, D.C., and newspapers in South Korea, Japan, and South America, which tend to support conservatism. The political activities of the Unification Church were opposed by some leftists. In 1976, members of the Youth International Party staged a marijuana smoke in the middle of a UC-sponsored rally in Washington, D.C. In 1977, the Subcommittee on International Organizations of the Committee on International Relations of the United States House of Representatives, while investigating the Koreagate scandal, found that the South Korean National Intelligence Service had worked with the Unification Church to gain political influence within the United States, with some members working as volunteers in congressional offices. Together they founded the Korean Cultural Freedom Foundation, a non-profit organization which undertook public diplomacy for the Republic of Korea. The committee also investigated possible KSA influence on the Unification Church's campaign in support of Nixon. In 1980, Moon asked UC members to found KSA International, an anti-communist educational organization based in New York. In August 1985, 6 years before the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Professors World Peace Academy, an organization founded by Moon, sponsored a conference in Geneva to debate the theme, "The Situation in the World After the Fall of the Communist Empire." The conference was chaired by Professors Morton Kaplan and Alexandros Stromas. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?